Hey there, creatives. Welcome to Wilding Creativity with me, Liz Kettle. I wanted to start this podcast, this first episode, with kind of a how did I get here and why I wanted to start a podcast on creativity. The the short answer is that the way I think about creativity has not been really addressed out in the world, and I really felt that there was room for us to explore truly living a creative life differently than what is easily had out on the market in books and podcasts. And so I wanted to kind of bring a different approach to it and more about living a creative life rather than being creative. Um, I have had a lifelong obsession with creativity. It began in my childhood, maybe even at my birth. I don't know. I may have been birthed with this special affinity for creativity. And I knew that it was just an essential part of my being. I've always known that. But the the funny part is that I didn't come with any kind of natural talent for anything. Um, I'm definitely not a dancer or a musician. I have no affinity for either of those. And I didn't have, well, let me back up a minute. I, at the, we didn't know it at the time, of course, because when I was growing up, nobody heard the word ADHD or neurodivergent. And so here I was, this highly creative child who was also very neurodivergent. So I kind of landed on the outer edges of just about everything. I I had this urge to be creative and was creative in so many different ways, but I also didn't have the um, ability to sit through and hone those areas of traditional creative studies, like drawing. I got bored. Learning how to play a guitar, totally bored, and my fingers hurt. Um, so I had this kind of tension all throughout my life with this deep, deep desire to be creative and to create and to make things, but also like a very, very ADD, hyperactive physical being. And growing up in a time when um, art was not, and creativity was not a high value trait. It was really more annoying than anything of value. And nobody knew anything about people who had ADD. It was not a thing back then. It was totally not a thing growing up in the 60s and 70s. Um, so that I had this kind of tension, like I'm this, but I'm not this. And I know I'm this and I'm not that. And my creativity would come out in so many different ways. It would come out in these connections that from disparate things. And people just could not understand why I thought this was a good combination, why A plus B would equal this magical happening. Or as I got older, I was able to solve problems really quickly. Not math problems. That was definitely not my forte. I still don't know my times tables. Just was not able to do it. Um, but I could create answers to complex problems that were like real world problems, things that kind of solved issues that were not in school. I don't know if that makes any sense, um, but I always got looked at weirdly for those because uh, it was not something that kind of fit. Most people weren't expecting it, and I was still pretty young, so that whatever answers I had, creative answers, I was dismissed a lot. So, as I grew up, I just always had this tension of not being able to do what um, culturally we if you're creative culturally, we send you into the arts. and I didn't fit there. So I was just weird in all the different areas. I was very smart, and I was very creative, but I didn't fit in the art group. I didn't fit in the smart group because couldn't do that times tables. So this tension was kind of always underlying my life. And it's part of what I think just kept this obsession with creativity, just as this underlying um, theme throughout my whole life. Um, and as I grew up and had kids, I started getting obsessed with learning about the brain. My kids, surprise, surprise, were um, also had ADD and other neurodivergent traits. And so I was learning about them. And of course, discovering that I had all of these things myself explained so much. But I still also could not quite um, bring the creative force, the creative energy into what was expected of me in the culture. There, I keep saying there was this tension, and this tension just underlaid my entire life. This um, feeling like a fish out of water because I couldn't quite. I was trying to fit into the culture, but I wasn't designed to fit into the culture. I was designed to do other things. I was designed to be super creative. And I can't tell you the number of times I would have some, you know, complex understanding of a situation, especially in politics or world happenings. And because I could see things that were just not related on the surface, and I could bring them together. And people just didn't, they just never understood. And I just got used to that look like, oh, you're a little weird. You're a little crazy. I don't see how that works. Um, but so I became obsessed with learning about the brain and creativity at the same time, always learning about creativity. And that actually morphed into learning about our brain hemispheres, what they do, and how much science and culture has misunderstood how our hemispheres function. It just fascinates me to understand this. And um, eventually, I've started learning about quantum physics and meditation and AI. And through all of this, I I kept trying to fit my creative brain being into the norm of the world around me. Like one time I signed up and paid for a certificate for it was a thing on creativity. I could be a creativity coach or something. And I signed up and paid for it. And then I started getting through the material. And the material was wrong. I knew it was wrong. I knew something about it was just not right. And I knew we were missing something. I never did do the test to get the certificate because it seemed so pointless. Um, but I kept trying to fit into that round hole in my little square peg. Um, so in that research to figure out what is going on and how do we understand um, creativity culturally and how does our brain work? I'm starting to think our body is involved a bit in creativity, in the act of creativity. But I really felt that we were missing, our science and our culture was missing some fundamental aspects of creativity. And with a little bit more learning and research, obsession, I realized that we were trying to understand creativity through the lens of the left hemisphere because we had become so addicted to our left hemisphere. Um, and our left hemisphere is important, don't get me wrong, but most of us grew up with the idea that your left hemisphere is the good hemisphere. It's the smart one. It's the one that has the science and the math and all the good things. And the right hemisphere, it's just got some fluffy, inconsequential, arty stuff. We don't really need that. We don't have, it's got intuition, maybe. We don't really need that. That's all woo-woo weird. And as someone who was fully connected to my right hemisphere, I was always trying to avoid that woo-woo weird personality that somebody trying to put me in that box um, of the artsy creative that kind of doesn't have a brain. Um, Stereotypes are so fascinating to me. But really, what we're finding now is that creativity is a whole brain experience. There is not one part of your brain that is not in use when you're in a having a creative experience. And to me, that is something that we really need to work on reintegrating our hemispheres. We have spent so much time, our education system, the way our businesses are run, they're all very much in focus of the left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is just kind of left out. It's like, oh, yeah, we should do some creativity training or some innovation training. And that never works because you can't work your creativity like it's not a muscle. You can't strengthen it through a series of divergent and convergent thinking exercises. Um, that doesn't work. And what I have come to know this with my whole being, is that creativity is an experience. It's something that happens to us. We have to make space for it. We have to show up for it. And we have to allow, it's like opening the dam on a river. The left hemisphere is so important in keeping us alive and keeping us getting things done. But if we keep it dammed up, it can only go so far. And once we take what do they call that thing? The chutes, so that the water can flow freely, that's when things get better. That's when we can really connect our whole brain, and all of us is available to us. And there's a part of the outside world that is available to us in a way that we don't actually have words for. And that's kind of the magical part of creativity, these things, ideas and connections that come to us when we didn't really know how we got there. Many, many creatives will tell you they do not know how they created that thing or had that brilliant idea. It just came to them. These dots got connected in their brain. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that there is some frequency or vibration that is creativity that we tap into, that we put our toes in that water. And one of the reasons I decided to start this podcast, the main reason I decided to start this podcast is because I see that we're in a situation at the moment where we need to really embody creativity deeply. With all of the changes in the world, with machine learning and AI, um, they can make connections and process information way faster than we can. And the world is changing at lightning speed that we're not really prepared for. But with creativity and tapping into our creativity, we will create something new, something better, something more magnificent than if we don't. When I think about AI, and I'm definitely not an AI expert, I've just kind of dabbled my toe into the water. But you know how if two gas stations are on opposite corners and one lowers its price, then the next one lowers its price, and they're competing by lowering their prices? Pretty soon nobody's winning and they're both going out of business because they can't they can't sustain lowering their prices anymore. And I kind of feel like AI is the same way because it takes all the knowledge that we already have. But in order to move further into something greater than what we are now, which is pretty great, um, we need to have that creativity fully embodied and in place in our culture. All of that intuition, all of that knowing that is not something that any machine can learn. We need to have that be at the forefront of our future. So that's a little idea of why I'm here, a little bit of my along the way journey. And each episode will have part of my life, some discussions about culture, brain science, community, personal development, art. We will talk about art and making and history around creativity and making and humanity. So I hope you will subscribe and join me on this journey.